everybody. I'm going to start the brain today with you. This would be one of my favorite lessons to teach you because of the interaction. So many of you guys have so many questions and you haven't studied the brain before, as far as I know. So unfortunately, it's going to be a one-person show again. I'm also going to include over the next day an additional video because there's just so much information on the brain. I can't do it justice in the 30 minutes I'm allowing myself right now. And so there's another video that I'm posting. If you're interested in this, I really highly recommend it. It's really going to bring the brain more to life than just my 2D presentation here. If you really like this, then you want to select things like neurobiology in your second year, okay? And those courses will be very obvious when you're making those selections. So, the brain. Okay, so we're just going to start with the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So what you want to know is this is what we're studying today. The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord, okay, and that's what we're looking at today is the brain. When you did your other homework, we looked at the peripheral nervous system, okay, so the peripheral nervous system is spines and the spinal, anything that branches off the spinal cord, basically. So any kind of nerves, sorry, I think I said spines. So the nerves that branch off the spine, all right? So what we're looking at here is there are going to be so many ways of locating and graphing, separating the brain, okay? This is one way that we can localize different parts of the brain. So this is like a very general way of separating the different parts of the brain. So the first one is the cerebrum, okay? So the cerebrum here is the largest portion of our brain, okay? So that's the cerebrum. Next we would have the cerebellum. Okay, the cerebellum is right down here, and it's quite easy to find because it's right under the cerebrum, all right? And then lastly, you've got the brainstem, which is all in this area here, okay? So this area here is the brainstem. All right, so three major sections of your brain. So what do you want to know about the cerebrum? It's the largest part of the brain, clearly. Okay, it's composed of right and left hemispheres. So this is looking at the brain. Obviously, this is one side of the person's face. We'd have the other side of the person's face here. So this here would be the left side. Okay, and then we're not seeing the right side. So there are right and left hemispheres. All right, what do you need to know? It performs higher order functioning. So when we say that, when I call it higher order, executive functioning, all of those things, those are the things that make you you overall. So where your intelligence is. So interpreting touch, vision, hearing, speech, your ability to reason through situations, controlling your emotions, all of these things and fine control of movements are done in this area of the brain. The cerebellum has one big function, and this is super important, okay? It coordinates muscle movements and it maintains your posture and balance, okay? So this is when people might say to me, okay, Miss, I heard that there's balance in the ear. That's absolutely true, but it's giving feedback and getting feedback from the cerebellum, okay? So this part of your brain right here is super important in how you sit up every day and the fact that you know how to sit up and the fact that you have balance, okay? All of these things here. So if somebody were to get a concussion and hit this part of the brain, they would be off balance. And then the brainstem is the first part of the brain to ever develop through evolution. So if we start here, okay, this is the very beginning of the brain. So in terms of our evolution and the evolution of anything that has a brain, it would have begun right here. And then we would have developed this section of the brain, okay, because obviously balance and posture, all those things are extremely important movement in the world. And then eventually we developed this section of the brain, okay? And human beings have a huge front brain. Okay, this lobe is very, very large, and this is where we have all that executive functioning, all of our reasoning, memory, and all of that stuff. Okay, and I'm going to get to that. So the brain did start here and worked its way up, and then we have this huge section here in the cerebellum that distinguishes us from other organisms. So the brain system, or the brainstem, acts as a relay center. Okay, so it says it's connecting the cerebrum and the cerebellum. All right, so it's taking care of the information coming from here, and it's giving this information from the pink spot too, okay? And then it gives that information to the spinal cord. So it performs autonomic functions. When you see I'm saying autonomic, it says automatic. Autonomic is another word for automatic. All right, so the brainstem is in control of your breathing, your heart rate, your body temperature, your wake and sleep cycles, all of these things are in there. Okay, so I could highlight the entire thing, but your digestion, sneezing is automatic, coughing is automatic, vomiting should be automatic, and swallowing is automatic. Okay, so all of those things are taken care of all in this area. So basic life functioning, keeping yourself breathing, keeping your heart rate going, maintaining your body temperature. All right. So continuing on, we have a left side of our brain and a right side of our brain. Okay, so the cerebrum is divided into two halves. You've got the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, so it's just another way again of dividing the brain. They're joined by a bundle of fibers called the corpus callosum. And this is one thing I would have you find if you were dissecting. Okay, so if we were able to be together and dissect that brain, you would see that there's a corpus callosum right here. So the corpus callosum serves this purpose. It allows the brain, the right side of the brain, to share information with the left side of the brain. So it transmits information from one side to the other. All right, interesting fact, each side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body. So notice the crossover here, okay? So this side is yellow, controlled by this side of the brain, and this side is blue, and it controls the opposite side of the body. All right, so I just made note up here. If you have a stroke on one side, you're going to feel the effects on the opposite side, okay? So we've got this crazy crossover that happens. The corpus callosum appears white, so I do want you to know that, okay? This is going to appear white. All right. Okay, so if you were to see a brain, you would notice that, and it does have a white appearance. All right, the lobes of the brain. Okay, so this is where we start to get into some more interesting things. So we've got 4 lobes of the brain. You've got your frontal, your temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. Okay, and again, I'm showing you so many different ways of dividing the brain into sections. The reason for that is because if you incur some kind of damage to your brain, you want the person to look at your brain and be able to say, okay, that's occurring in the temporal lobe, okay, not just the cerebrum. We have to localize where the damage happens. And on that note, much of this information that is received, okay, occurs because of two different ways, because originally it's because people were damaged. So if they incurred some kind of brain damage, they would be able to see where the brain was damaged and then say, okay, that's the loss of the function associated with that. So therefore, that's what that part of the brain does. Unfortunately, I am going to be honest with you, they do take rats and destroy parts of their brain and see what damage has been lost. You can't do that with a human, obviously. So that's another way that we get this information, okay? And then there are much more advanced ways now in 2020 of getting information. You can stimulate different parts of the brain and see what the person does and what they smell and how they react, all right? So if you're wondering how we know all this stuff, it's from all those 3 different methods. So each lobe can then be divided again into areas that serve some very specific functions, okay? And I'm going to go through that with you now. It's important to note that the lobes of the brain, there are very complex relationships between the lobes of the brain and between the right and the left hemisphere. So what I'm telling you is that there's just so much I can tell you, and I can't tell you all that in 30 minutes, but there's a lot more going on than what I'm going to be able to tell you today. But these guys interact with each other, and the different lobes interact with each other all the time, okay? And what you're going to find is one section of the brain might not be responsible for everything, right? You've got a whole bunch of different parts of the brain being in charge of different functions. So if we start here, okay, we've got the frontal lobe, all right? I'm not sure that maybe I will color code. Okay, your frontal lobe is right at the front here. Okay, so actually it does include the motor strip, so I'm going to include that motor strip. That's included in your frontal lobe, and this is your frontal lobe right there, okay? Your frontal lobe is a very important part of your brain. and I'm going to say, I think it might say down here, but I'm just going to give you a little bit more. It includes something we call executive functioning. So, you know, an executive in an office is somebody that's really high up there in importance, right? They're watching over everybody that and everything that they're doing. So this involves executive functioning. So when you are thinking, okay, so if you were studying for final exams and you know you get that headache in the front of your head, it's because you're thinking, okay? So this is where you're thinking, you're planning, you're problem solving. I'm going to run it out of room here for the motor strip. Problem solving, okay, etc. occur. So much of that happens there, okay? You also use your frontal lobe to organize, okay, and control your personality. But I'm not going to put that in there right now. As part of your frontal lobe, you've got this area here that doesn't always come off very clearly, but now you guys have my original copy, so you might be able to see it much better than in a photocopy in a booklet. This here is Broca's area, and it is part of the frontal lobe, and Broca's area is in charge of speech production. So this is something that if you do want to take any kind of neurobiology, and cognition is what they'll call it, if you do decide you want to take any of that in your second and third year, you will hear about Broca's area and Wernicke's area. So that's speech production. In other words, you are going to be able to make sounds, okay? So the actual physical act of making the sounds that are appropriate for the language that you've learned or the languages you've learned come from there, all right? In addition to that, in your frontal lobe, you have movement, the motor strip. So the motor strip, even though I told you and I will tell you there are other parts of the brain that take care of movement, this is where you're going to get movement, okay? The ability to have your movement. Secondly now, you've got your parietal lobe. So the parietal lobe is basically on the top of your head, okay? And it does not include Wernicke's area. So it's going to go like this, and it's going to just skip over Wernicke's area. And that's the parietal lobe, all right? It includes the sensory strip. So sensory strip, go figure, it takes care of your sensations, okay, your senses. So a lot of your information from every part of your body is being sent right here to the sensory strip. The parietal lobe is really involved in your perception, okay? So perception of yourself in an environment, math, and spelling, okay? They know that those things are taken care of in that area. And then we get to the temporal lobe, which is basically on the side of your head, all right? And this is why I really want you to watch that video that I've posted for you, okay? So this is, whoops, I just skipped into the temporal lobe a little bit there, and it includes Wernicke's area. So the temporal lobe really takes care of a lot of your memories, okay? So this is the side of your head. So the temporal lobe is involved with memory and understanding language because of Wernicke's area. So understanding and understanding language. Okay, so I'm going to leave those together. Understanding language. Memory and understanding language. So a lot of your memories are stored in this area of your brain. Okay, that's kind of cool. More so your personal memories, right? And then what we have here is your occipital lobe. Okay, the occipital lobe is at the back of the head, and it's the fourth of the lobes in the cerebrum. And this here, occipital, you're going to have to link this in your brain. It has to do with vision. So you get a whole lobe of your brain that's involved in vision. If you get knocked at the back of the head, you're going to see stars, okay? And that's, if you've ever had that happen, that's why, because this is totally involved in your vision. I'm not going to put anything else down there because vision is extremely important to a human being, and we've dedicated a whole chunk of our brain to it, okay? So, and then I've got Wernicke's area here. So I just want to let you know that this is how you comprehend what I'm saying to you right now. This is what's very, very active. So if you were to put radioactive tracers in your brain, when you're listening to somebody speak, you would see this would be very, very active. There'd be a lot of blood flow in this section, okay? So that's your speech comprehension, and that's what I wanted to tell you. So if we look down here now, you've seen them divided up. If we look down here, Your frontal lobe, so many things that happen there. I could highlight absolutely everything, but I do want you to know that it's your area of intelligence, okay? Personality, behavior, emotions. If people suffer any kind of trouble in this frontal lobe area, they can change their personality, okay? So the doctor will say, just understand it's damage. It's not that the person wants to act this way, but they've had a damage in that area, all right? And because of Broca's area, we have speaking and writing, all right? And I'll talk to you about what happens if Broca's area becomes damaged and and Wernicke's area becomes damaged. So your frontal lobe, you've got your judgment, your planning, your problem solving, okay? Like I said, a lot of what makes you you is in this area. Your body movement because of the motor strip, your intelligence, your concentration, your self-awareness, all of these things happen in that area. So when you are concentrating and studying for that final exam, or studying for anything, or even using your LMS quiz, that's what's working there. That's why you can often get like a headache in that area, okay, because of that concentration. The parietal lobe is working on language and interpreting language and words, okay? So that's what happens there. I know Wernicke's area is not part of that. Your spatial and visual perceptions are in your parietal lobe. So what does that mean? It means you know where you are in a room because of this. So you know where, for lack of a better way to say this, you know where you are in a room. So in other words, again, lacking the fact that I'm with you in a classroom, I would say you know exactly where to come in every day and which desk to sit in. So you could be thinking the same thing about where you're sitting right now. You know how your body is going to fit into the room. Okay, you're not going to bang into things all the time because you have a very good perception of where your chair is compared to your desk, compared to anything else in the room. Okay, occipital lobe, vision, 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 vision. All right, that's what you need to know. Occipital is vision, okay, in every single way. So color, light, movement. The optic nerve feeds directly into here, and you're going to see that, okay? I mean, you're not going to see that, but the result is you're working on vision there. The temporal lobe is understanding language, okay? Not making the sounds, but understanding the language itself. It's also involved in memory, okay? So lots of your memories, like I said, are stored there. Hearing is another one, okay? I didn't mention that before. And sequencing and organization, okay? So in other words, you know that one comes before two. You know that you're going to read left to right. Those are just a couple examples of sequencing and organization. All right, so on the back of this then, we have language. Here I'm going to just bring up a couple of different things. So we've got aphasia. Aphasia is a disturbance in language, okay? So when you hear the term aphasia in terms of the brain, I want you to be aware it means that damage has happened, all right? So if damage happens to Broca's area, all right? So if this area is damaged, then people have difficulty moving their tongue or facial muscles, all right? So what they do is they can't produce sounds, all right? Now here's the thing, the way to distinguish between these two. These guys can't produce sounds, but they understand language. Okay, so if you have Broca's aphasia, you can't make the sounds properly, but when somebody is speaking to you, you know what they're saying, okay? And that can be proven in many different ways, you know. It's very difficult for me to tell you that, but they can still form letters, forming the letters in the words, but they don't write within the lines, okay? So you could ask them to answer a question on paper, and they would show you that they have an understanding, okay? They have difficulty in speaking and writing, so forming the letters is difficult, making the words are difficult. They don't write within the lines, but there are ways that they can have people answer questions on like an iPad, for instance, okay? Wernicke's area, called Wernicke's aphasia, so damage to this area, okay, is when you're not able to understand the language, but you can make the correct sounds. So they'll make the correct sounds associated with the language, okay? It sounds like gibberish, and they don't understand anything that in terms of language. So there's no understanding of language here. So no understanding of language. However, the speech sounds, even though sometimes it's called like a word salad, the speech sounds are correct according to the language. So the phonics, the phonetics are correct. So no understanding of language here, but the sounds can be made properly. So I'm just going to find that. They can make speech sounds, however, they have difficulty understanding speech. So these guys are like opposites, all right? The cortex is the part of the brain that's covered. So the cortex is the outside of your brain, okay? And the outside of your brain is what you would normally see, obviously, when any kind of a diagram of a brain is shown. So the surface of the cerebrum is called the cortex, okay? What you need to know is it's folded up massively, so it increases surface area. So I'm not going to get into the hills and the valleys of it this semester. Approximately contains 16 billion neurons, okay? They're arranged in different layers. The nerve cell bodies color, all right? So what we're going to have here, sorry, I'm just trying to read and highlight at the same time. The nerve cell bodies color, the gray, brown, giving its name the gray matter. Okay, so I shouldn't even read that. I should have just said it out loud. This is what I want you to know, okay? The outside of your brain is gray. All right, so the outside of your brain is gray. All right, and that is because that's where you have your cell bodies. All right, now what am I talking about? I'm talking about the cell bodies of the neurons. Okay, so the brain is made up of neurons, nerve cells. The white matter is inside of your brain. So if you were to look inside of your brain, you would see the white matter. Why? Because those are axons. And what do axons have on them? They are myelinated, and so they have fat. So what you're seeing here is the myelination. All right, and so that's why the inside of your brain looks white and the outside of your brain looks gray. So the white matter is on the inside. Okay, it's on the inside. And so when they say gray matter and white matter, that's what they mean. So in other words, the processing from the nuclei is going on here, but the firing of the different neurons is going on inside of your brain, okay? And the folding increases the brain's surface area. Therefore, you're going to have more neurons, all right? The more neurons you have, the better. Okay, deep structures, we're not going to look at this semester. So let's look over here at the picture of the brain, okay? Just different things I might point out to you because you would have a dissection. Not going to have that this semester, obviously, but just so that you are aware, here is your thalamus. Okay, and I'm going to talk to you about the thalamus later. So this is all the thalamus, okay? The pineal gland sits in here. Okay, you've seen the pineal gland before with melatonin, all right? The cerebellum, I showed you this a little bit earlier in this note. So responsible for balance, posture. Okay, I'm just pointing out some major things here. There's that corpus callosum I was telling you about, and that it looks white. So you can see it's embedded inside of the brain, okay? The hypothalamus, okay, I'm just going to get a different color here. We'll go with blue. So the hypothalamus is right outside of the thalamus. It's right in here, meaning under the thalamus, all right? So that's your hypothalamus, and then hanging off of that, you've got your pituitary gland. There's the pituitary. Okay, corpus callosum, you can see I'm going to leave that in white. And then again, if you were doing any kind of dissection, I would have you label the pons, okay, and the medulla, otherwise known as the medulla oblongata before, okay? So now people just kind of call it the medulla. But in grade 11, we tell you that it's the medulla oblongata, and that leads right into your spinal cord, all right? So these sections here, labeled for you already, include your brain stem, all right? And then we get into the cerebellum, and then we've got the cerebrum. And you can see this is why you have to know different sections of the brain. You can't just say, okay, it's in the temporal lobe. We have to get even more and more detailed than just saying this is the cerebrum. You have to know about these different sections. You personally don't, but if you're studying the brain, you need to. All right, so let's go through this limbic system. I want to show you the limbic system first in the diagram. So diagram's a little bit small. The amygdala is right over here. Okay, so that's your amygdala. That's part of the limbic system, and I'll tell you what that does in a couple minutes. Then linked to the amygdala, right beside it, you've got this thing called a hippocampus. Okay, and the hippocampus literally means seahorse. Whoops, seahorse. Okay, and that's because the people that found it thought it looked like a seahorse. So this here, they thought looked like a seahorse. Okay, so that's your hippocampus. I've given you your amygdala, and then your hypothalamus is right in this area, okay, underneath the thalamus. So that's the hypothalamus, right over here. So hypothalamus, hippocampus, amygdala. Those are some major parts of your limbic system. All right, so going back to the note then, the hypothalamus, you've studied that already. We've seen this hypothalamus. It's located on the floor of the third ventricle. We're not going to worry about that. It is the master control of the autonomic system. Okay, so autonomic means automatic. It controls behaviors such as hunger, thirst, sleep, sexual response, okay, regulates body temperature to some extent. Also, I mean, we can just go over all of these things here. Plays a role in blood pressure, emotions, and secretion of hormones. So this is where you would have seen your limbic system before, okay? It's part of that endocrine system. The pituitary gland, okay, is your master gland, and that's where I'm going to leave it at that. Pineal, part of circadian rhythms, and why? Because it secretes melatonin, okay? So your day-night cycles, your sleeping cycles. Your thalamus is your relay station, all right? And it says for almost all information that comes and goes to the cortex, remember the cortex is the outside of the brain, it plays a role in pain sensation, okay? Attention, so attention to whatever you're doing at that moment, and which is linked to alertness, obviously, and memory, all right? So all these things are linked to memory as well, or the thalamus is linked to memory as well. Basal ganglia, I'm not going to go over this semester. And then your limbic system includes many, many of those different sections that I went through with you. It's the three of them specifically. So the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus, okay? And when you think about the limbic system, this is why I wanted you to know about it. You have to think about your emotions, okay? So a lot of your emotion and your emotional training, being able to keep yourself under control, a lot of that is in the limbic system. So there's learning there, and there's memory as well, okay? So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Your emotional reactions and the fact that they are in proportion to what is going on, that is learned in the amygdala, okay, and stored in the amygdala. So you know a 2-year-old child has temper tantrums, but you know what happened as a result of your temper tantrums. And so therefore, that has been stored in the amygdala. If the amygdala gets damaged, emotional response and emotional reactions are not in tune with the environment going around, and the environment. So in other words, if the amygdala gets damaged or it's overstimulated for any reason, you could laugh at a funeral type of thing, okay? So you could laugh at something tragic, and then vice versa, okay? You could cry at something that should make you happy. It's just a response that is out of proportion or incorrect for the environment that you're in. And you can see, again, we've got hippocampus and memory. So memory is in many different areas, okay? So we're moving on now to the very last section. And we've looked at that. So you're going to label the brain as the best you can. I'm going to leave you to do that. I just wanted to also tell you about this specific part of the limbic system that's involved in memory formation. And we're going to leave it at this. You have different types of memory. You have short-term, long-term, and skill memory, okay? It says the prefrontal cortex holds recent events briefly in the short-term memory. The hippocampus is responsible for encoding long-term memory. All right. So anything that you remember, that you can recall, that's stored in your hippocampus. This tiny little seahorse. Okay. That's where that's stored. So you need to do something called practicing, right? Short-term memory, like a phone number, can recognize or remember things for about 7 units or 7 digits. So your short-term memory basically kicks out beyond 7. So in other words, if I asked you to memorize a phone number, Okay, 1, 2, and I'll make it something different. 9. Okay, you could keep this in your brain for a short period of time, but if you really wanted it to be memorized, you'd have to practice it. Okay, and so short-term memory can become part of long-term memory with practice. That's the way you do that. And then here's the cool thing. Okay, I'm just going to find it in here. It's unlimited. Okay, to the best of our knowledge, our long-term memory is unlimited. So when you get to my age and you start to try and remember things, it's not because they're not there, it's because I haven't used that connection for a while. So when my kids say to me, do you remember when this happened when we were 2? I might have forgotten. But as soon as those neurons are reconnected, as soon as I start to send electricity down that path to that memory, and so will you, you'll get that information back and it'll start to become really vivid. So our long-term memory is unlimited in content and unlimited in duration capacity. So in other words, you can probably remember things from when you were 5. Okay, there's no time limit on it. And when you turn 90, you're going to be able to remember things when you were 5. Okay, so that it's just a matter of this. You have to re-trigger those neurons. So everything you're learning right now, if you are truly putting everything into it, you will have these memories next year. Okay, it's just, and in 2 years you can recall information. The thing is that you just have to reactivate those neural connections, but it's there. So I thought that's really super cool. All right, so you can look things up, studies on how short-term memory, and the fact that it's basically 7 units long. So if somebody asks you to remember a phone number, you can remember it for a short period of time. But if you don't go through the problem of practicing that and putting it into this, then it's going to be lost in a day for sure. Okay, you won't be able to remember that anymore. So your personal memories of everything that's ever happened, that's in your long-term memory. Facts, okay, so it can include anything like facts, like the capital of the United States, okay, and figures. So you can remember numbers, all right, but you have to practice them. And then skill memory is processed in your cerebellum, okay, and skill memory stores things like autonomic, learned memories like tying your shoe. These are skills, okay. Playing an instrument, that's a skill, and riding a bicycle. All right, so that's the difference between skill memory and these others. These guys are more facts. This is something that you're going to have to use your body for. And very, very lastly, I just want to tell you about the meninges, just so you've heard it. The meninges have 3 different layers on your brain. So going, I said, from the outermost layer to the inside. So the outermost protective layer of your brain is called the dura mater. The next one is the arachnoid matter, and then the pia mater, okay? And so what these guys do is they offer a layer of protection. And those 3 together are called your meninges. So if you've heard of meningitis, it's an infection in the meninges. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. The problem with meningitis, okay, is that now you guys are getting kind of past the area. Teenagers get meningitis way more frequently than anybody older than a teenager or younger than a teenager. So you're getting out of your danger zone now. The problem with your meninges is if they swell, you have to think about what's on the outside of that meninge, and it's the skull. So the skull is very, very good. It protects the brain. That's the purpose of the skull. But in the event you should get an infection, the brain can only swell so much, right? It can't swelling against the bones of the skull. And so therefore you start to get damage on the inner layers, okay? Because this is getting bigger and it's compressing what's inside. Okay, so I just thought I'd tell you that. On the good side of things, you've got something called the blood-brain barrier. Again, something you might want to look into. I believe it might even be in the video. A lot of bacteria cannot get through that. Okay, so your brain is really well protected on what it allows to get into it. If I had more time in another day, we could talk about some of the different chemicals that are allowed to get into the brain. All right, but I don't have time for that. So I'm assigning you now page 37 in addition to other work. Okay.